We now live not in the new normal that I described, but in the never normal. It's a world of constant change, volatility. Everything happens faster and faster and faster. So I really believe that after a decade of applauding the unicorns, there is now a decade ahead of us, which is really the decade of the Phoenix.
Welcome to our latest episode of our video podcast, Tech.Rulez.Period. My guest today wrote the best-selling book, The New Normal, 25 years ago. His latest book is The Phoenix and the Unicorn. He calls himself a technology enthusiast. Welcome to the show, entrepreneur, keynote speaker, and author, Peter Hinssen.
Thank you very much. Happy to be here.
Thank you, Peter, for being part of the show. One hypothesis that we have in our Tech.Rulez.Period setup is IT is dead, technology rules, period, which basically describes a bit how technology has evolved over the last years from being something very needy to something which revolutionizes everything. What's your view? I mean, you've written your first book 25 years ago to your latest now. Can you describe a bit your view on what technology actually did do to the world and will do to the world?
Happy to, and thank you for inviting me. First of all, I am a technology enthusiast, so I learned how to code when I was young.
Yeah.
That passion for technology has never gone away. On the contrary, I think it's gotten even more intense the older I get. But I have seen technology evolve. And for a long time, technology was something far away. It was something alien. And I think that was probably the reason why IT had the evolution and the journey that it had. Mm-hmm. The first book I ever wrote was called Business IT Fusion, where I said, I think what we need to do is bring business and IT, or business and technology, closer together. Because in the old days, it was very much a very separate type of thing. You had business, and then you had IT, and as you know, you had all these theories about how to align them and how to get them to work together. That is nonsense. Huh? Yeah. But I did technology startups when I was younger. That was my game. I did 3 technology startups, loved that, and I loved seeing the potential of new ideas, and then finding ways to bring that to market and to find customers for what I thought was really cool. Mm-hmm. But it was always a struggle. It was always a struggle because I got excited about new technology, but then how do you get business people to understand the potential of that? And I thought I had to go through IT, and after a while I realized IT was actually the blocking factor. Okay. In a lot of cases, IT were the ones who liked to just keep it as it is because they knew how to run this, and that was the safest, and that was the easiest solution. Anything new was not something that the traditional IT people actually liked. And after I did the startups, I said, that's what I want to focus my research on. And there's 2 elements to that. One is I started teaching at London Business School and then later at MIT Sloan. And instead of a traditional IT audience, which was my traditional audience, I had a business audience. And I would get so excited about technology and innovation, and I could see that they didn't understand it. Okay. And I think this is something which over the last couple of years has changed tremendously because a business audience has gotten more IT savvy. A business audience understands technology a little bit better now. Yeah. When I started teaching at London Business School, they had no technology. And then they all had BlackBerries. And then they all had iPads and iPhones. Yeah. And I think you now have more and more of a business audience, a management layer that understands the potential of technology more than it was, say, 10, 15, or 20 years ago. That's number one. Yeah. The second thing is that I think in society, technology has become so normal, and we see this every single day in our day-to-day activities, on our phones, when we look at our children, how technology changes their lives, how it's changing society, how it's disrupting things faster and faster and faster. And that's why I think technology, which used to be far away, has now become very much core in the thinking of how companies think about strategy. And I think that's a very good thing. The question is, what has it done to IT departments? And I have seen a lot of the traditional CIOs really fail to step up to that new role. They were there to run technology, manage technology. But I think the real capability or possibility is for them to lead, strategically in a world where technology is an enormous leverage potential. And I think this is where I now see the companies that I admire, the companies that I observe, that I research, that are capable of transforming themselves. That's where you have that type of technology leadership. And that transition from the old IT to that new technology strategic role is something that is an ongoing struggle. But I'm very hopeful that it's going in the right direction.
If you mentioned a lot the person that is running technology. How do you best describe that person, attitude-wise?
Well, it depends, of course, on the type of sector that you're in. I remember Nicholas Negroponte from MIT Media Lab always said you have two types of companies. You have bits companies and you have atoms companies. And a bits company is a company where your main ingredient is information. A media company, a bank, an insurance company. And of course, that is where digital is a little bit easier because you're already in a situation where you're dealing with information. Atoms companies are more difficult. That is the traditional companies, cement, mining, retail. But I'll never forget, Nicholas said years ago, eventually, every atoms company will transform into a bits company because information and technology becomes core in virtually every business. If I look at the bits companies today, I think the real technology leaders there are people who still understand the very essence of what they do. They have to understand the métier, as the French, you have to understand the trade. But at the same time, they are much more focused on that business strategic innovation type of environment. I'll give you an example. I joined the board of a bank in Belgium where I lived 4 years ago. And our head of technology is somebody who has a technical background. He grew up to be enterprise architect, but then he was headhunted by the CEO for 4 years to be his right-hand man. And 4 years, he saw everything from risk to audit to finance to procurement to HR, but he also saw, all the different business aspects of the bank. And then he became the technology leader. And I think that combination of understanding the real essence, but seeing that strategic advantage, that is super special. In the atoms part, I think we still see a lot of companies that are still in that transformational phase. And I see a little bit more traditional IT leaders in the atoms business. But I don't think that's going to last. That is just a matter of time.
Thanks, Peter. Very interesting view. A bit pivoting to your latest book, The Phoenix and the Unicorn. I mean, it describes how companies need to reinvent themselves to basically stay successful. Can you a bit describe your research and what you find out and what basically describes a unicorn?
Well,
and the Phoenix, obviously.
Yeah,
so.
and I wrote the book because I was getting maybe a little tired of the unicorn stories.
Yeah.
Every conference you went to was Airbnb and Uber, and those are great stories. But most companies out there are never going to be Airbnb. And I wanted to find traditional companies, companies with history, with legacy, with battle scars, that were capable of actually leveraging the potential of technology to reinvent themselves. That's what I call a phoenix. And in the beginning, I thought, well, how am I going to find that? And it was actually the retail sector where, I got the inspiration. I had the chance to do some work for Walmart. And Walmart is the traditional retailer in the US, biggest retailer in the US, but actually it's the biggest company in the world, 1.7 million employees. And I had a chance to see them and see their transformation in action. And as you know, retail is being changed. We have a lot of disruptors, the Amazons of this world, the Alibabas, and Walmart was capable of reinventing itself. And in the last 6 years, I think have built an extremely beautiful transformation program where Walmart is now stronger than ever. But it also meant that they completely had to rethink everything they did. They had to change the big boat. First, they tried to buy a couple of companies and acquisitions that didn't work out. Then they realized we have to change the big tanker. Today, a big part of the retail footprint is being used now for last mile delivery, for e-commerce. It is a brilliant transformation. And what I've seen there is that I think if a company like Walmart with 1.7 million people can do it, then I think anybody can do it. And then I started digging further and really looked at companies capable of doing that. Disney is a phoenix, 100 years old, but fighting like hell against Netflix. A company like Microsoft is a phoenix. Microsoft is 50 years old, and 10, 15 years ago, weren't doing very well. They were actually going down. Then Satya Nadella came on board as the new CEO, completely built a new strategy towards the cloud. And today, certainly with the AI environment, is one of the leaders again in technology. So I became fascinated by companies that, even if it's difficult, even if you have a lot of history and baggage and legacy, still capable of transforming themselves. And what I've learned is three things. First, you need the right leadership to make it happen. I mean, if you don't have the top who is committed to making a phoenix, forget it. I mean, and I'll give an example. Walmart, the CEO of Walmart, Doug McMillon, I think he's a visionary leader he ran Walmart International before he ran Walmart globally. And international, that means Mexico, Canada, but India, China. He saw how retail was changing in China. And when he became the big boss, he said, my God, it's not just fighting against Amazon, we really have to change the big boat. So leadership is number one. The second thing you need to do is you need to find a way to combine the old and the new. And it's so easy to say, oh, old is bad, new is good. But then you just antagonize the company. What you have to do is you have to bring them together. And how do you do that? Because often these are conflicting concepts and conflicting ideas. And the third thing you need to do is you need to really find a leverage mechanism for innovation. Innovation is the only way to make a phoenix happen. And that really means that in a lot of cases, you have to support the innovators. And in most companies, that doesn't happen. It really looks well to, as a CEO, say, yes, we have innovation. You have a couple of guys, doing amazing stuff. But these guys are not innovating. They lose almost all their energy fighting the 99% of the old company. And if you can leverage that potential, then I think that phoenix has an extremely good chance of succeeding. And I have been very fortunate. I wrote the book. It came out 2 years ago. Since then, I've traveled the world and found even more phoenixes. And for me, that is now a fascination. Let me be very clear. Not every company can be a phoenix. It's nice to aspire that, but it takes a lot of work. But for me, it was really heartwarming to find that there are companies out there that even if it's difficult, even if they're in tough markets, even if they have a lot of baggage and emotional scars, they're still capable of really focusing on that future. And to put that in perspective, I think it's going to become even more important because we now live not in the new normal that I described, but in the never normal. It's a world of constant change, volatility. Everything happens faster and faster and faster. So I really believe that after a decade of applauding the unicorns, there is now a decade ahead of us, which is really the decade of the phoenix.
And you speak a lot, if I listen to you and explaining it, a lot of stuff comes down to the individual employees that are basically embracing then that adjustment or whatever. Is there a sort of formula of what kind of employee you would need for such a transformation as a phoenix, or basically recalibration of yourself? Or is it depending on the organization, it's always a different kind of person?
Well, let me nuance that question. I think what you need to do is you need to find a way to get as many people on board as possible. And that means that in the cultural diversity that you have in your organization, you will have people that are super enthusiastic about new things, and you have people that are very skeptical or even afraid. You have to bring them all on board. And I think instead of maybe a model employee, I think I focused more on the type of leadership you need to actually make it happen. And I think these leaders that are capable of guiding a phoenix, for me, are people that understand that never normal, and that are capable of portraying a sense of urgency without scaring people. It's easy to scare people nowadays.
Yeah, well.
With everything that is happening, you could just use AI and scare the living daylights out of everybody. But as a leader, how can you actually build a sense of urgency, a compelling message for everyone in the organization that people feel, hey, I want to be a part of that? The second thing, I think, is having that open perspective. I mean, I see so many leaders that are focused on today and next quarter or next fiscal year. I call it the day after tomorrow thinking. You have to understand where things are heading and then try to figure out that you spend enough time and resources to focus on that. And the third element that you need as a leader is you have to organize for innovation. What you often see is that it's not enough to just talk the talk. You have to implement it. And the model I like to use is the hourglass model. Everybody knows what the shape of an hourglass is. Yeah. The top of the hourglass, that's where you pick up the ideas, and then you need to reduce the sauce, sense and try. But then it needs to fall into the bottom part of the hourglass. And this is where you focus on run and scale and execution and operational excellence and bottom line. But what happens in many companies is that the sense and try is actually not aligned with the run and scale. And as a leader, you need to make sure that it's there and there's a continuous flow. And if you can do that, I think the chances of building a phoenix are much, much higher.
Okay. Another hypothesis that we have, which is a bit linking to how do you get these kind of people, is that hiring should be focused on the right mindset that the people have and not really on the skills, because the skills continuously have to anyway evolve because the technology evolves, the organizational elements evolve. What's your view on that?
Well, I think I can relate to that. I do believe that some fundamental skills are necessary, but I do believe that mindset is going to be even more crucial. And I think this is also a fundamental problem in our educational system. I've been teaching at business schools now for a long time, and I always make a joke when I teach the MBA class. My first line is always, I'm really happy to be here, and I'm really glad that everybody here chose for the perfect education for the last century. And it's actually true, because an MBA still does the subjects that were relevant for the world 20, 30 years ago. In a world of the never normal, constant volatility, a world where technology and AI is changing everything constantly, I think the most important thing is that you are open-minded, that you are curious, that you have a capability of understanding, sensing, deducing, and then leveraging faster than ever before. And that mindset is unfortunately not something that you see in the educational system. It's something where you have to find the people that are naturally maybe gifted with those capabilities. But I believe it is one of the most crucial things to get right. But it's also not just in the hiring, it's also in the selection that you have at the board, that you have in selecting your CEO or your executive team. And I think this is where we now see a very interesting shift as well. I mean, when I joined the board of the bank, it was really a rejuvenation of the board. And they hired people with completely different backgrounds like myself, because they realized a bank is a technology company. We need to understand digital at that top level. But we also needed to understand the challenges that we have societally. We have to understand the challenges we have environmentally. It was really a recomposition of that top level organization to actually focus on mindset, not just skills. And even being open-minded for a world that is completely different than your normal world. And I think that's going to be a big challenge, because how do you build teams? How do you build leadership in that development? I do believe, as I said, it's an essential ingredient for phoenixes, because if you don't have that, it will never work.
You mentioned your board engagements that you have. Last question from my end. If you now look at the different organizations that you are sitting on the board compared to all the organizations that have participated in your studies or that you basically see as part of your business life, in percentage, I know you probably can't give me an exact number, but in percentage, that's top down, how many have the right capabilities on board level to actually make these kind of technology related decisions?
gut feeling
Yeah.
is probably 15%.
15,
yeah.
1-5.
1-5. I think at this moment we still have a lot of work to do. And I think in many companies, as I said, I make a difference between bits companies and atoms companies. Bits companies, this is where the percentage is much higher because they've been confronted with that a long time ago. I'm on the board of a media company called Media House. We have newspapers in 5 countries. But that was a paper business 15 years ago. It's a digital business now. So that's where I think that level is higher.
Yeah.
But in a lot of atoms companies, it's still not there. And I think if you really want to leverage the potential of not just technology, but data, of information, of intelligence, then you need to augment that board level significantly. But as I said, it's not just the board. I mean, the board is a very small aspect, but that team, that executive team, and I think that relationship between stakeholders, board and management team is a very interesting one. The most important thing might be, are you capable at that level to build a long-term strategy in a world of volatility? And I go back to Walmart, my favorite example. They hired a brilliant CEO, but if you look at the family, the Walton family, who Walmart is publicly traded, but the Walton family still has the controlling stake. They really don't care about this fiscal quarter. They care about the long game. And that is where I've seen phoenixes. If you are capable of building a long-term game and then be very flexible, because I think you have to be super focused on that long game, on that North Star, but then you need to have that flexibility to make it happen in a world that is more agile than ever before. That, I think, is the dream combination to make it right.
The dream combination. I mean, a very good closing word. And thank you for being part of our video podcast today. Also, a personal note, I mean, I shared that story a year back when we first met in person. You have also inspired myself as part of my PhD thesis, and that goes almost 25 years back with New Normal. It was a pleasure hosting you, and thank you very much for today.
An absolute pleasure to be here. Thank you very much, Dominic.
Thanks, Peter.